Hey, paisans, the time has come. On the air since 2009, the independently produced, non-FCC compliant champ of video game talk podcasting. Here comes Tiger Claw Radio. Here's your host, Critical Failure.
Welcome everybody to Tiger Claw Radio. This is your host, Critical Failure. This week, we're going to return to our roots and take a look at the Dreamcast. Dreamcast is something that, it's funny, it only comes up every once in a while with me. I'm not one of these people who talks about the Dreamcast all the time, but every time it comes up, it's always a deep dive. And it's like, oh man, yes, I remember this. This is so much fun. So we're going to dig into that a little bit after this first track. For music this week, we're going to return to battleofthebits.org. Now, they've been putting out a bunch of releases lately, and if you're not familiar, every time they put out a release on Bandcamp, it's free only until the next one comes out. So you have to really keep up with them if you want to get all this stuff. The latest one is called Pure Data, and it's got 4 tracks on it, which is abnormal for them. Usually it's like 20 plus, and then when one comes out that's an offshoot, it might have like 8 or 9. But these really small releases, I mean, they've done them before, but it's very uncommon. This one's got some abstract and chilled out stuff, very against the grain for Battle of the Bits. I'm actually really digging it. We'll see what you think. Let's take a listen from Argarak. And this is the 3rd track off of the album. And when we come back, it'll be the Dreamcast. Stick with us. You're listening to Tiger Claw Radio. Ooh boy, that is against the grain. That is very much against the grain for Battle of the Bits. That's pretty experimental, asynchronal jams there. Yeah, I dig it. Okay, so this next one is what something I recorded in place of a Vancast, and it's a bit on the lengthy side, so I'm going to dig right into it without further ado. All right, let's go there now. You're listening to Tiger Claw Radio. What's going on, everybody? It is Friday afternoon, and we're captain's logging it, because I know when I sit down to put together the show tonight, I'm not going to be able to do it all in one shot. So I got the cell phone out. We're going to try and put a little something together. I got some good stuff, though, to go over. First and foremost, just a little quick sort of bullet point for you. Chex Quest, the first-person shooter based on the Doom engine that was literally distributed in cereal boxes, that's out on Steam now. Now, I didn't pay attention too closely, but it's a free game on Steam, and I believe it's an HD remake. I believe. But I didn't download it. I just saw the Chex Quest Steam page, and I was like, oh, yeah, I remember that game. And then that was it. So, yeah, if you got Steam, you're interested in playing Chex Quest again, go ahead and look it up and get yourself a copy. Free. Super cool. I had a bunch of stuff for Dreamcast that I wanted to go over, but I feel like that's the beef of what I have, so I'm going to get back to that. Never know. Yeah, my son's been playing ZZT lately. Good old ZZT from MS-DOS. I wish I could explain how much that game was played in my house during the time when I was a blue-collar worker. I just started working for a plumber. We didn't have internet in our house. I lived in an apartment, and I had this little laptop that I got from a pawn shop for like a couple $100. It couldn't get on the internet, and I could basically play. I could only play the games that I was able to transport to it via CD-ROM or what have you. And I didn't even have like USB thumb drives at that point. So what I had was like an early version of DOSBox, and on DOSBox I had a few things that I would play. I played a lot of Shadow Warrior during those days. And ZZT. ZZT was a big one. I would take... I seem to remember getting ZZT games from the library somehow, although I don't remember exactly how I did it. Going down to the public library and getting ZZT games and bringing them home on diskette or something. Although how exactly I managed that is a little sketchy. Yeah, so it's still around. I mean, the site, the same cultural hub website called Z2, it's still there from years ago. And my game that I released on Z2, it's actually still up, Island of ZZT. So my son's been playing it because it's got a little game creation tool. And, yeah, that's been pretty neat. So, seeing that on the screen again, after all this time, is a bit of a trip. I have on my notes to mention the Redskins debacle. I'm not much of a football guy. I have to turn the fan on, I'm sorry. I tried turning the fan on so that it would sound better. But it's just boiling hot in my office. The weather's been oppressively hot over the past week. Speaking of oppression, right, the Washington Redskins. Yes, and not because of the name, because they haven't won in 30 years. We grew up as Redskins fans. In my house. So my dad passed back in 97, but I remember before that staying up late and watching the football games with him when I was really young. And then when he passed, football kind of passed with him in my house. Now I have a sister and the oldest of my brothers who are both very much into football. They would like watch games with their kids at their house and stuff, but I wasn't really a part of that. So football is something that I haven't been super interested in a lot of years. However, because I grew up in this Redskins household, I have some Redskins things hanging around. I have like a Redskins beanie that I've had for 20 years or something like that. I'm not much of a Redskins fan. But it's not because I dislike the Redskins. It's because I'm not really a football guy. I got excited when the XFL came back this last time out because the XFL's product, XFL 2.0, was actually they did a great job. It wasn't weird and exploitative like it was the first time around. back in the early 2000s. So I got into the DC Defenders a little bit, but that quickly died, which kind of broke my heart a little bit. But anyway, so the Redskins have dropped their name, and I don't remember exactly what they've changed it to at this point, but it's literally like the Washington football team pending a new name or something to that effect. This ties into video games because prior to them officially announcing they dropped their name, Electronic Arts said they pulled the Redskins name and logo from the up-and-coming Madden game. So, yeah. No more Redskins. They've been the Redskins a long time, but but they've been talked about. I remember being very, very young and people talking about not liking the name. So that's a topic of discussion that's been around for a long time as well. So, I don't know. I'm kind of indifferent on on the idea. It's just like, whatever. Okay, so they changed the name. That's cool. It's some other football team now. I'm actually kind of like, maybe rebranding is the way to go. Maybe the idea of getting a new team name and logo and stuff might bring some life back into Washington, D.C. football. XFL intellectual property is going up for auction. So maybe the NFL should buy them, and then they could make them the DC Defenders. That'd be pretty awesome. That'd never happen, though. Yeah, so that's a thing. Okay. What else do I have here? Yeah, this one doesn't really tie into that too much, but given the racial tension in this country, are we still able to use the word clan when we talk about video games? My clan is the best clan. You could say I'm in the clan. I don't know. I'm waiting for somebody to get in trouble for saying that they're in a clan. I'm curious to see if you guys still hear people say the word clan. Is that still a phrase that's used? I don't know. I haven't heard people talk about clans since the TF2 days. I was with the Corner Pub TF2 group. And then when Dota 2 came out, that entire group just disintegrated. It turned to Inside Out. I really miss those people, too. But that was the last clan that I was in. And all you got to do is go over to Steam and look up when Dota 2 came out, and that'll tell you how long ago that was. All right, so now we get to the real video game stuff, the real meat and potatoes of the Vancast. Why I thought it was worth it to sit down here. I want to talk about the Dreamcast a little bit. Dreamcast. That's really what this is about. This is not about the Redskins. This is not about ZZT. It's not about Chex Quest, although I do think you should look up Chex Quest. But when it comes to football, the best football is on the Dreamcast. Why? Because if you're going to play two-player football, the big problem with playing football two players, at least when it comes to retro games, I haven't played a football game, that's been released lately in a long time. But in the old days, if you played like Madden football on the Sega Genesis, you could look at the other person's screen and kind of tell what play they were going to pick. Now, there were ways they could hide it, like it would only show 3 plays, and they were able to pick one using their control pad. But you could figure it out that way. Now, if I remember right, football on the Dreamcast, you would use the VMU to pick the play. Yeah? The little window. You know what I'm talking about. On the controller, and that's how you would pick the play. And they did that, so when you played two-player, you could secretly choose your plays and not tip off the other player. So football on the video games, it's the best on the Dreamcast. Unless you're going to play Mutant League Football on the Sega Genesis, because that game's still awesome. But that brings us to the Dreamcast, which I wanted to talk about a little bit about. Dreamcasts are worth owning. Why? Because the games are awesome, but they also do lots of stuff. The thing that I don't want to talk about the thing that killed the Dreamcast, because that usually ends up being a weird spiral. But one of the things that sticks out about the Dreamcast demise is the whole burned games thing. Most Dreamcasts can just play burned games. You burn the game on your computer into a CD-ROM, you can play it in your Dreamcast. Now, I played many games on my Dreamcast that way. All right? And I talked to people about this in the past, and I've heard mixed things about it. When you burn a Dreamcast game and you play the CD-ROM, does that damage your Dreamcast? I did a little research, and I wanted to figure it out definitively. And I got quite a lot of conflicting reports. But I think I've been able to whittle it all down into a profile that we can use to extrapolate some sort of real answer. And by that, I mean I have a couple of posts from 2009, I've got a couple of posts from 2010, and I got a couple of posts from 2015. And you can see by reading threads from those 3 different years, because that's a 6-year time span, you can see the opinion of how this works change a little bit over time. Now give me a second, I gotta pause this and then we'll go through it. I think we're good now. Are we ready to go? Yeah. Right. So at the end of all this, I have a note that says reasons to play burned games that are not piracy. And that's a thing that I want to bring this around to. This whole thing about playing burned games, it doesn't completely revolve around piracy, although I'm not going to pretend that that isn't an issue. You know, if you can burn any game in the world, why would you spend $200 to play some rare game that you're only going to play for 5 minutes anyway? Look, I'm not going to pretend that doesn't exist. But for the sake of argument, that is not what we are talking about today. I am not discussing pirating games. I'm talking about playing games that you can burn to a disc. Okay, a lot of it is piracy, but it wasn't always the case. So I have a quick bullet list. Reason to play burned games that are not piracy. Number 1, NES ROM hacks. Yes, you can just play NES ROM hacks on a computer, but there are a lot of collections you can get that burn right onto a disc that you can play on your Dreamcast. And when I did not have a good computer, that was one of the ways I would do it. I didn't even have a Raspberry Pi, but I did have a Dreamcast. I would burn ROM collections made in Dreamcast to a disc, and I would play them that way, and it worked pretty well. The Dreamcast cannot emulate Super Nintendo very well at all, but NES collections, very playable. As a matter of fact, I'm holding in my hand a burned game that I have for the NES classic Sweet Home. I wanted to play Sweet Home on the TV. So, at the time, the Dreamcast ISO zone was still around, and I was able to get a Dreamcast ISO for the NES game Sweet Home, but just Sweet Home. This was not a collection. So I got into GIMP, you know, the freeware Photoshop clone, and I made a cover for Sweet Home, like a box art for a CD jewel case that shows the Sweet Home cover, and it has the little Dreamcast logo. So yeah, I still have this. I've got a Dreamcast ISO of Sweet Home. Now, when I burned the disc, it never worked. But I held on to it because the ISO zone is now gone. All right. Yeah, so NES ROM hacks. Another big one is VMU programs, okay? Changing the icon on your VMU, the little memory card thing. I think legitimately in the old days, it was just some games had an option to use whatever the icon was. That's how it was done. But with the ISO zone, again, now gone, you could get home-brewed discs whose sole function was to reprogram the VMU. Put homebrew games in the VMU, change the icon to whatever you like, and do all sorts of stuff. Now, again, I looked around for sites that had some of this stuff because I found all of it on the ISO zone. Long gone. And it's a little heartbreaking because there's a lot of sites, a lot of broken links. There is a Dreamcast revival, like cultural center, but it's not as comprehensive as the ISO zone. You really have to dig for these things case by case. There are sites that are devoted to how to program the VMU, but I didn't find a repository for built programs. So programming the VMU is another one. Okay, fourth is DOSBox and Scud, playing like point-and-click adventure games. And then finally we come to Beats of Rage, which is the open source clone of Streets of Rage. So, also called Open Bore, BOR for Beats of Rage. So, Open Bore had a lot of games that are built with it, and there's still a little community website up there with a big forum and stuff like that. There are a lot of these open bore games that you can burn straight to a disc and play on your Dreamcast. I have a number of them hanging around now, burned to discs that actually work, and I'm glad I took the time to do that, because I got these from the ISO zone, and that's long gone. However, I think you're more likely to find open bore games still around than you would, say, some of the old VMU stuff. So there's some things. There's some things to do with the Dreamcast that do not involve piracy, all right? So if you're thinking, hey, just spend the money and buy the games, yes, okay, there is that. But there's still a reason to see if playing with the disc is worth it. So I wanted to make sure and throw that out there. Okay, so let's go back to, let's take a trip back to 2009. So this came from, let's see. This came from a forum, and I didn't save a bunch of stuff on it, but I looked around and got a couple of things that basically sum up how the community felt overall about this. And this is a thread that's based around, hey, if I play, is it going to mess up my Dreamcast if I play burned games? One person writes, an old myth rears its ugly head. I have never heard of this actually happening to anyone. Somebody replies to that, to an extent it's a myth, but it does contain some truth. Burned Dreamcast games do not damage your GDR drive, but, as stated above, it can wear out the motor and lead to damaging/breaking of your Dreamcast. And then he names the person. The problem, though, is that it's going to happen anyway. Dreamcast has moving parts like any new console, so sooner or later it'll break down after extended use. Burned games may speed that up. Mine is 9 years old, and from the last time I played Shenmue 2, data-intensive game, I did notice quite a few data read error while I was playing. So, while it is a myth to stop piracy, it does contain a bit of truth. And those are two posts from that topic, but essentially the overall tone of everyone who posted was, it's a myth. Now let's go to 2010, mid-2010, 1 year later. Now this one was a bit more of a mixed bag. Somebody writes, the original GD-ROMs, original Dreamcast games, will work smoothly on the lens, very little strain. But CD-ROMs will cause a little strain, as CD-ROM is not the official default media for playing legal DC games. However, the lens comes from a regular/modified CD-ROM drive. You can even swap them with an old CD-ROM drive if you're lucky enough to mod the lens tray physically. My Dreamcast disc reading ability was slowly killed by me playing... This is another person now. My Dreamcast reading ability was slowly killed by me playing CDR backups all the time. It was not a quick process, but it didn't last more than about half a year before I needed to do the laser alignment tweaks. And even with that, it eventually started having trouble reading the retail discs. Next person. I still have my launch system. Okay, mind you, this is in 2010. I still have my launch system, and I've been using CDRs since 2000. Using Teo Yuden's CDR, and it's still going strong. The only maintenance I do is clean and re-grease the gears and the laser sled. Next person. Funny, my very first Dreamcast managed to survive about 6.5 years with playing CDR backups and legit games no problem. What killed it was that a failed exhaust fan. But the replacements have since had no problem with any. Even so, though, I've heard of a work in progress of a replacement mod that replaces the original GD-ROM motor with a PCB and can internal USD/SD stuff in. At least with this, we'd finally be able to play one-to-one GD-ROM ISOs and, in theory, kill any incompatibilities that have been experienced otherwise trying to make the games fit into the 700 megabytes of CDR space. That's the 1, 2, 3, 4 posts from 2010 that I got. So then we jump to 2015, and what I find interesting about 2015 is this one is on Reddit, and I think the Reddit thumbs up, thumbs down system has an impact on the reliability of the information, because what happens is we have somebody who sounds like they know all about the parts, and because this person sounds like he knows, he's at the top. Now, he's got a very plausible statement here. So let's see what he has. The question is, I heard people play burn Dreamcast games, never tried it. It can put undue stress on the laser of their Dreamcast console. Is this true? Is there much of a difference between burned CDRs and a regular game? Here's the top comment. Saying laser is a misnomer. GD-ROM disks are written with data tracks having certain width and therefore contain a spiral radius. The disk drive is made to step the motor which houses the laser in small increments that correlate to the specific layout for the disk data. Reading CD data forces the step motor to constantly adjust itself outside of those parameters more frequently, thus wearing out the motor faster. Additionally, burned CDs are generally less reflective than pressed CDs, so there's usually a higher variance in reflectivity across the disk. This means that the motor, which adjusts the focal lens on the laser, adjusts more often as well. These two factors contribute to a disk drive which wears out much quicker over time. You can also generally notice a CD version of a game making more noise if you play the GD-ROM version back to back. That is the number one comment. Interesting stuff there. Here's a reply. It's a bit of a gray area, but the theory is that badly packed ISOs can cause the laser to work harder by shifting around a lot more. It's not the laser that breaks, it's the motors controlling the movements. But like I say, it's never been proven, and it's usually blamed, but it's probably more related to the console's age. Yeah, there you go. So, nothing conclusive. The most plausible scenarios presented sound like it increases wear and tear. But how long ago are these? It's 2020 now. The most recent stuff I have presented here is from 5 years ago. My console was not new when I got it. All right, you guys remember Dalimar from Wasted Seconds? He was a former writer from Zofar.net for a long time. A site which, by the way, is still around and is still the cornerstone of emulation. Not ROMs, but if you want to go get an emulator program, Zofar.net is the place to go. He wrote for that site. Dalimar sent me a Dreamcast for $10. It stank like cigarettes when it got to my house, and it was covered in filth, but it got here. This was not a pristine system. I had to leave it in a box full of dryer sheets for 3 weeks or so to get the stink off of it. But I got it up in working order, and there's my Dreamcast. It has always worked. This was years ago. This was probably 8 or 9 years ago or so. Yeah, and mine still works fine. The only caveat to the persistence of my Dreamcast is I've never been a huge Dreamcast player. It's always been touch and go for me. I can't really remember ever sinking hard all night into the Dreamcast. Played a little Choo Choo Rocket with my son. Did some emulation with some NES ROM hacks. I remember having this weird port of Quake. Not a port, but an actual PC version that was dumped onto the Dreamcast somehow. I remember Dead or Alive. I've got the Dreamcast version of Dead or Alive. What else have I done on the Dreamcast? I played some Project Justice. Great game. There's a Magic the Gathering game that came out on the Dreamcast. Only in Japan, though, and I played that some. These are touch and go. Nowhere in this list is the Shenmue. Do you know what I mean? Shenmue is the game where that becomes the game while you're playing it. And every time you sit down to play video games, it's already in your head. That's the game you're going to play. Do you know what I'm talking about? When you're playing through a game and you don't have to spend time thinking about, what am I going to play? You're not thinking, I'm going to sit down and play video games. No, it's, I'm going to sit down and play Shenmue or whatever. For me, past several weeks, it's been Saints Row in one form or another. But I think that just recently came to a close because I beat the last game that I have access to. Yeah, so because of that, even with the increased wear and tear of using CDRs, I did not put the wear and tear of it onto this machine that you would typically see when it was brand new. The people who got the console, like, when it came out, and then exclusively played CDR games all day, every day, because that was their hot console. I never really did that. So, I don't know. Also, this being a lot later, I do know that there's a hard mod which circumvents the disk drive entirely now. So I don't know. It's a calculated risk whether or not you want to use CDRs in your Dreamcast. I still think it's cool to own the original game, if you can. I've got Dead or Alive. I used to have more Dreamcast games years ago. I had Unreal Tournament, and I had Quake 3, and I had a game called Hidden and Dangerous, which I was a huge, weird fan of. And I even went so far as to get Hidden and Dangerous and buy the mouse and keyboard for the Dreamcast so that I could play it like it was on the PC. Yeah, very, very weird. So I had a few Dreamcast games, but I was never the big Dreamcast guy. It was the party console of its era, and as such, there are some party experiences on the Dreamcast that you can find nowhere else. Power Stone with a full party is something I've never got to experience on a Dreamcast, but I bet it'd be awesome. Got to play some multiplayer Power Stone at MagFest on Candy Cabs. I can't remember if it was last year or the year before, but that was pretty cool. Power Stone isn't anywhere else, is it? I mean, that game didn't show up on Xbox Live or something. At least I don't think so. So that's my little rant about the Dreamcast. I think it's an awesome system. Doing the research for this bit kind of broke my heart a little bit, because there's a lot of stuff that's not around anymore. Because it was all made up of little sites, and a lot of those little sites went down, and the ISO zone had... The ISO zone was essentially a ROM repository, but they had a collection of a lot of stuff that came out in these little tiny sites. So as the little sites went down, those works remained on the ISO zone. And now with the ISO zone gone, a lot of that stuff just became, digital decay, I think was the term that Hemrock coined a few months back. Yeah, so that's the old Dreamcast-a-rooney. I think that's a bit all I have for now. We're 27 minutes in. I got a couple things I got to take care of this afternoon before I can sit down and put the episode together properly. But I'm going to call that it. I'll send you guys back to the studio, and I'll see you there. Back again in the studio, and before we move on any further, I want to take a quick minute to thank the sponsors. I usually like to do that about 20 minutes in. Here we are, almost 35 minutes in. Vancast ran long. Do what you got to do. So to these people, they give their resources to make sure we can come back every single week. And believe me, in a time like this, when we're all home, I know how difficult it can be to share the few pennies we have. So thank you guys so much, and I hope you're still tuning in and enjoying the party. So to them, I offer early access to the show as soon as it gets completed, put together, and produced. It goes up to the supporters, which is usually... Friday night is the night I like to do it, but lately it's been Saturday more than not. And I also read their names off in a hall with distinguished gentlemen. They are Hemrock, EmeraldRangers.com, Tecmo Balls, Darabka, Konstantin Kelman, and Eric Kentroller. Thank you guys so very much. By the way, Tecmo Balls, the issues you were having with your RSS feed going out, I think your RSS feed is hooked up to... It's hooked up to the Podomatic feed. Take a look and see if it'll allow you to input a new RSS URL to set up a new feed, because I don't know what kind of service you're using. And if it does have that, let me know, and I'll get you a direct feed to the Patreon so that you're getting the new ones on your RSS feed. That thought did occur to me, and I haven't taken the time to figure it out yet. I wanted to make like a little private video where it's just like, here's the feed, here's how we do it, and then you can hook up your RSS reader to the Patreon account, and that's how you'll get the podcasts. I never took the time to do it. I know it's possible, though, because Konstantin Kelman walked me through it, and we got it set up so that he could get the Patreon early access episodes streamed in via RSS. So let me know. Just take a look at your RSS reader, whatever podcasting tool you're using, and see if you can put in an RSS feed. Those things are kind of tricky because some of those podcasting tools are just like, they're aggregates of several podcasting sources, and there's no real way you can directly manipulate the feeds, which kind of sucks, to be perfectly honest. So that means in order for me to stay on it, I would have to go back and continue updating the Podomatic account, which I'm willing to do if that makes it work again. I'm just curious to know, because I don't think a whole lot of other people really use the Podomatic feed. But anyway, that's technical nonsense, and therefore uninteresting, I think, to everyone else apart from you and me. So let's get back to talking about video games. So rather than go back to the Pure Data album, let's play something that I put together myself in the what's the name of the DAW I use? Something ridiculous. This is a little DAW that I picked up on Steam, believe it or not, and it's called Music Maker 2017 Steam Edition. And I think the retail version of the DAW was like $15 or something that was not a lot of money but seemed like a lot at the time. And I made a few things with it. This is right before I discovered Reaper, which, you know, is essentially free and works much better. I was trying to break into Vaporwave. I made a little Vaporwave track, really short, like 45 seconds long. That's kind of has its foundation in Lara Croft samples from the original Tomb Raider. I don't know. I think it's kind of weird. Take a listen, see what you think.
Welcome to my home. I'll take you on a guided tour. No. No. Go on. Try it.
How are we doing now? All right, we got an email from Hemrock this past week. That's a good one. Let's see what we have. He writes, Hey, CF, I have one word for you. Dreamcast! Yay, internet high five. It's almost as if I read this one before making this week's episode. I really enjoyed listening to your little slice of Dreamcast content. Even before I had listened to the episode, I was just trying to get back into the Dreamcast. Matter of fact, about 2 weeks ago, I replaced the battery in the system with my newfound soldering skills. It's a pretty easy mod. Once complete, your Dreamcast no longer asks for the time and date. If you're interested in this mod, I highly recommend ordering the parts through Console 5. It's an incredible website that offers high-quality video game-related parts for repair purposes and at a surprisingly inexpensive price. It's a sketchy proposition to get electronic components such as batteries off of eBay. So I went with Console 5 instead and had a great experience. I ordered the Dreamcast battery replacement and a bunch of batteries for Game Boy carts. I put a little hyperlink in the email to the vertical holder of the Dreamcast. You'll need this and a rechargeable Dreamcast battery for the mod. Currently, I'm using my Dreamcast to listen to Smooth Jazz Volume 2 on CD while typing up this email. All right, quick break from the email so I can address this. Let's take a look. All right, so he's got a little vertical holder, joint cell batteries. I'm taking a look at the stuff that he sent in the links. We have a battery here. Yeah, cool stuff. I usually buy my electronic components through Mouser, which is a really good website. Shipping is crazy though. It's like $10 shipping for anything off of Mouser. But that's how you if you're trying to buy like a big complex order of like specific specific resistors and very specific capacitors and that sort of stuff, you put together a parts list, you pay the $10 and then you get them off Mouser at like I don't know, a penny a part or whatever it is. But let's get back to the email. That's, by the way, those are components where if you have like just the PCB and you're trying to build it, Mouser, that is how you do that. In this case, it looks like you've got kits. You've got a kit and you've got, you know, a battery replacement, and that's really it. So yeah, that should be much simpler. But back to the email. He says, in my recent Dreamcast dealings, I realized that even if the battery runs out on the VMU, your saves are still okay. Yes, that's true. I think the VMU uses flash media like the PS1 or the PS2 memory cards for the save data, and then uses batteries for the VMU clock, mini games, and the like. So I got all my old saves still. Yes, that is absolutely true. You only have to worry about the VMU batteries, which they gobble up, by the way. You only have to worry about those if you're actually going to play the VMU games, which are fun. I mean, I recommend... See, this is where you can get those sketchy eBay batteries, and that's fine. Just get yourself some eBay batteries. You stick them in that VMU, and you play them until they die. And when they die, that's fine. You can just go back to playing your Dreamcast the way it is. That's the way I did it, and that seemed to work okay. But let's get back to the email. It says, another reason I'm getting back into the Dreamcast is due to my recent purchase of Pure Solar on the system. I figure... Since I spoke so much about the final release of this game a decade ago, I should finally give it the good old college try. The Dreamcast has some bonus content not found on other releases of the title. Also, for the first time in over 3 years, I finally have a game room. This past month, I finished setting up the majority of it. My cable management is lacking, but on the flip side, I'm not hooking up every console I own. I'm using a 4-way AV switch for my composite inputs with only a few select consoles. I'm pumped. It's been way too long. I'm psyched for you, man. That sounds awesome. It really does. Yeah, I remember you flipping out for Pure Solar, but what I find interesting, though, if you think back to your Retro League days, when you would bring up Pure Solar and everybody else in the Retro League would kind of be like, oh, this again. There was not a lot of these new games for old consoles. That was a thing, yes, but it was not as prevalent as it is now. Now we've got a huge list of stuff you can buy off of Atari Age. You can buy Nintendo games. There's a whole slew of Dreamcast games. Wind and Waker Puzzle Battles is a really good one that I enjoy. But we didn't have all that in those days. It was so we had Pure Solar and a few super expensive NES carts off of Retro USB, and that's really it. So, yeah, Pure Solar I think was a bigger deal. Its release, just the fact that we were getting a new, fully developed, fully original RPG was a big deal. But let's get back to the email. Okay, yeah, he's talking about getting his game room. As part of having this game room, I want to sit down and play every one of my NES games. Good luck. The NES is the largest collection I own, and many of the games I've hardly played, and some I've not played at all. Yeah, same here. So I'm pulling them off the shelf in a quasi-alphabetical order to give them a whirl. I'm also designating a silly 1 to 5 star rating. I know you hate ratings. So far, I've only gotten through 2 games. I just started yesterday. I played 1942, a classic vertical scrolling shooter, 3 out of 5 stars, and 10 Yard Fight, a primitive arcade-style American football game, 2 out of 5 stars. Next up is 720, 8 Eyes, and Adventure Island. All right, quick break from the emails so we can address this. 1942 is an awesome game. I think that's a fair rating. I don't really have a problem with ratings. If you want to rate them, then you do what you got to do. I just always thought, there's flaws with using a rating system because if you do it long enough, eventually you're going to take 2 games. I'll be able to go back into your backlog of games that you've rated and say, hey, you rated this awesome game lower than this other mediocre game. You know what I mean? Also, I find it very difficult to quantify an experience into a 1 to 5 or whatever scale it is. It's the experiences tend to be usually gradient, and a little bit more complex than that. Hats off to you if you're able to do it. I have nothing wrong with other people using numerical scales. I think I used to think it was a lot weirder than I do now. I don't know. I don't really use them myself. Bithead 1000 did it with quarters. So yeah, you're good, man. But back to the email. Speaking of 8 Eyes, this is actually my most recent addition to my NES collection. See, I realized today that Pico Interactive is having a sale on Steam. Pico is a publisher that buys the rights to various old-school console titles and puts them out for North America, some of which have been previously released in our region, such as 8 Eyes. As a side note, I actually met the owner of this company at a Classic Games Fest in Austin, Texas, circa 2012. They were just a fledgling company with only a handful of games. Now they offer both physical and Steam games. For less than $10 today, I picked up 8 Eyes on the NES, Brave Battle Saga for the Sega Genesis. Interestingly, this game was released as Final Fantasy in Russia. See the video here. Dorky and Yimp for SNES. This is actually the first game from the Pico that I played at a Classic Game Fest and really liked. Unfortunately, they wanted around $35 for the physical card, so I passed. Dragon View, also for the SNES. That's a great haul in my book. I'm much more interested in my ability to play the game legally than I am in owning physical media. And this is a great way to snag some legit ROMs. After you buy the game in Steam, go to your library, click the game, right-click the game, Properties, Local Files, browse local files, click on the res folder, find the file labeled Game. This is the actual ROM file, and all you need to do is add the appropriate extensions, such as NES, BIN, SFC, etc., etc., and now you can play the game on your emulator of choice. Alfred Chicken would also make a great mascot for Tigerfest. I assure you that I do not live close to either you or Sendu, but I would entertain flying to Morgantown, West Virginia, or whatever Tigerfest may be. Morgantown actually looks pretty cool, and it has a Cracker Barrel, but no Waffle House. Washington, PA is just north of Morgantown and has both. Anyways, all I know is that Tigerfest 2040 will be held at the National Harbor Convention Center due to the explosion in popularity. Awesome. He goes on, Cleater is legit. What Dreamcast games would you recommend? Have you played any recently? Keep dreaming. Hemrock. All right, some great stuff here. Let's go back a bit to this Pico Interactive stuff. I seem to remember him talking about this briefly in the distant past, but it's been a while. So he sends me a link to the Pico Interactive online store. Okay, let's see what we have. I see a big list of systems. I'll click on them. Some rarish looking games. Noah's Ark on the NES for $39.99. There it is. Yep, I can buy a super rare physical games at this link. That no longer interests me, unfortunately. I would have been all about it many years ago, but I'm like you. I want to play the games. And there's nobody to share my physical collection with apart from my kids. And now my kids are getting a little older, and they don't care about awesome physical games. They don't care. They're not from that era. You know what I mean? So when I buy a physical game, it's for me and me only. So it's a pretty select few that I'm after these days. Okay, so this looks good. I'm interested in like the digital stuff you talked about. They're having a sale on Steam. All right, let me go over to Steam real quick. This email is from 3 days ago, so that sale's probably over already. But even if it's not like a discount that's active right now, I want to see I want to see the Steam pages for some of these. Some of the games you listed, I wouldn't mind just out and out buying if it was what I was actually going to play at this moment. Give me a second here. Pico Interactive. I hope that works. Something tells me it won't, though. Yeah, here we go. I have a couple of these games. Super Noah's Ark 3D, Spiritual Warfare, and the Wisdom Tree Collection. Are those Pico Interactive? Zero Tolerance, look at that. From the Sega Genesis. Motor Mash. This is great. Yeah, and there's 8 Eyes. It's wow, it came out August last year. I don't even think I noticed that when it came out. Brave Battle Saga. There it is. I'm looking at all these games that you listed, and they all look dope. They really do. What else? Dorky and Yimp. Dork and Yimp, however you pronounce that. Pretty sweet. Pretty sweet. Power Punch 2. Look at that. Power Punch 2 is available on Steam. I had no idea. Sleepwalker. Some of these games I actually have. This is pretty sweet. Way to go, Hemrock. Dragon View. There's Dragon View. That looks dope, man. Iron Commando. Super cool. I'm going to minimize that. I'm going to take a look at that when I'm off the air. Was that everything? We talked a little bit about where to do Tigerfest. I'm I'm interested to hear what Sendu has to say about location. That was Morgantown was his pick, right? I'm game for either one of those. Both of those, because I took the time to look them up. They're both like a few hours away, but close enough that I could get there in a single day. So it's not like driving all the way to the middle of the country or something. It's not like 6 or 7 hours. And I'm not saying 6 or 7 hours is out of the question if that's what we settled on. But the closer it is, the more plausible it is, and that's the whole point of picking some place that's, in the middle of all of us. My suggestion was, since the three of us, I think, are the only ones seriously considering this, you and me and Sendu should talk at some point off the air where we can talk real names and real locations. Because I'm trying to, all that stuff is kind of not really podcast material. But let me know what you think, because obviously we can't do it now. It's at least a year off or so, however long it takes for all of this coronavirus stuff to heal. So right now it's just hypothetical, but I do like the idea of picking a location we all agree on. So awesome stuff. And I'm also down with making Alfred Chicken the mascot. To get somebody on Fiverr to draw a little Alfred Chicken logo that says Tigerfest, and maybe make a few hats or something, and then distribute them when we all meet up. That'd be fun. Something fun like that. Hemrock, man, it's good to hear from you. Oh yeah, you also asked about Dreamcast. What is worth playing, and what have I been playing lately? All right. It's been a little while since I played the Dreamcast. I talked a little bit about some of the stuff I played historically in the Vancast. One game I wouldn't mind playing again is Dreamcast was where I first experienced Code Veronica. I didn't have it, but my buddy NG had it. He had Resident Evil Code Veronica, and I played all the way through that game. No, not all the way through. Probably 3/4 of the way through on a Dreamcast, like many years ago. Only because he was in the room and he was able to say, all right, this is where you go. Go there and get this item. All right, now go here and get this item. Yeah, it's good times. I've been meaning to play through Code Veronica again for a lot of years. That would be fun to play. Even to the point where I bought it on the PSN, like probably 5 years ago. And I can fire up my PS3 and it's there, Code Veronica. It's just that one is where the kids are, and I wouldn't play that around the kids or around the children's. So yeah, it is what it is. Some of the Dreamcast games I really like, I only encountered outside of the Dreamcast. For example, Typing of the Dead, right? That's a pretty awesome game. But I never actually played it on a Dreamcast. Another game that I love, it's kind of a guilty pleasure game, but I really enjoy it, is Space Channel 5. Say what you want. I love it. Ulala reports the news, the outer space news in Space Channel 5. That's a fun game. Early rhythm games, pre-DDR rhythm games. Good stuff. I'm just looking at a list of the top Dreamcast games. Choo Choo Rocket is, of course, the game that sticks out as an experience you can only really get on the Dreamcast. The list I'm looking at now says it has Ikaruga on it, which I came to love on Steam, and also has Street Fighter 3 Third Strike, which is also an amazing game. That's one I came to know on the PS3. I got a copy of Third Strike and had a lot of fun with it with NG. And then later on, of course, Capcom has that Street Fighter bundle that's been out for several years now. Third Strike is in there, so you can play it. Because it's been released a bunch of times, I don't know what it costs. I know you're not much of a fighting game guy, so you probably won't be interested anyway, but I think that's like a really nice fighting game, like a really nice one that you can get for an affordable price. The thing about fighting games, especially old ones, is the really good ones are superly duperly expensive. Do you know what I mean? Like, good luck buying Capcom versus SNK2 on anything, anywhere, ever. unless you're talking like PSN, or if it's been re-released digitally somewhere. Good luck getting a digital copy of that game. Ain't gonna happen. But Third Strike is an exception. Good game, also affordable. Is it though? I feel like I gotta check on that. Let's check on that. This is our weekly episode of CF looks up stuff on eBay and tries to talk awkwardly while doing so. Dreamcast. Street Fighter. Let's just do Street Fighter Raw and just see what we get. Street Fighter 3 Double Impact, $27. Original and complete. Okay, that's a little up there. That's mid-tier. Third Strike, $90. Wow, not at all affordable. Street Fighter Alpha 3 had a Dreamcast release. Man, I loved Alpha 3. I think Street Fighter Alpha 3, I'm going to say this is kind of like a touchy thing. I think Street Fighter Alpha 3 may have the single best roster in any fighting game. That's just what I think. Just what I think. People don't like the PS1 version of Alpha 3. I love that game. I love it. I remember when we got the PlayStation 3, Street Fighter Alpha 3 was one of the first games that we bought off of the PSN. It wasn't the first, because we have a long tradition of buying a terrible game first. But it was like the second or third one. And at the time, I think I was talking to Retro Kaiser, and he was like, nah, man, there's frame issues. That one's all about the arcade. And he would know because he's like the fighting game guy. But I don't know, man. I love that game. It's got a bigger roster, and the only real problem with Street Fighter Alpha 3 on the PSN is that it has to load between every single battle, and that becomes irritating really, really fast. So I would be interested to play it on the Dreamcast to see if it's any better. I'm looking at it original and complete for $35, and that has a bid on it. There it is, just Alpha 3, $90. Wow, this is kind of depressing. Street Fighter 3 W Impact, that's a Japanese game, $90. Don't buy any of these Dreamcast Street Fighter games. They're too expensive. Don't play video games anymore. They're too expensive. All right. I also see Phantasy Star Online on this list of like noteworthy Dreamcast games. Does anybody who listened to this, do any of us have any experience with Phantasy Star Online? I have always been massively curious about this franchise. I've heard strangely nothing but bad things about it, but every screenshot I've seen of Phantasy Star Online, especially when I was seeing it back then, just looked amazing. It looks so good. And it's probably like you can't play it anymore, right? I don't know. I've heard people tell me that that's incorrect as well. But I've always been curious, and I've never actually played it. So Phantasy Star Online is another one for the Dreamcast that has my attention. What else do we have? This list has Daytona USA on it, Daytona USA 2001, but I gotta be honest, if I'm playing Daytona USA on a console, it's gonna be on the Saturn. What else do we have on this list? This is just some random list of top tier Dreamcast games. Quake 3 Arena, nah, I mean, I guess it did exist, but loading time was bonkers. Shenmue, what do you think of Shenmue? I didn't have the patience. Super slow paced. People love it. The story's supposed to be great. And I really like these open world type games now. I might like it now, but when I played it first, it didn't quite stick with me. What about Jet Grind Radio? That's a good game. I played Jet Grind Radio a bit. I think when it comes to Jet Grind Radio, I got more into the one that came out for the original Xbox. There was a sequel that came out on the Xbox. It was like Jet Set Radio Future or something. But I played the original Jet Grind Radio on Steam quite a bit. Not quite a bit, but I played it some. I really liked that game. I remember Engie, when we were roommates, he used to play that quite a bit. A lot. And we got Crazy Taxi. That's another one. Crazy Taxi is a good one to own for the Dreamcast because you can get it digitally elsewhere, but they changed all the other releases because the original game had The Offspring playing that song, yeah, and it's like an iconic part of Crazy Taxi, and they took it out of the digital versions. So that's one that's worth owning on the Dreamcast. And then at the top of this list is Soul Calibur. Yeah, okay. I like Soul Calibur. I got Soul Calibur 2 and 3 for the PS2, and that's kind of where my interest lies in that series. It's a beautiful series, though. All the Soul Calibur games are good to some degree. So yeah, okay. That's just a list of like the textbook choices. I don't really have any hidden gem type choices for you, because that kind of thing, the only real way to get that sort of information, unless you're getting it secondhand, is to have spent a lot of time with the console, which, I clearly haven't. I played it a little bit, but, that's about all. Okay. I guess that's about it from Hemrock. Good to hear from you, brother. Hope you're staying safe. Hope your family's in good shape. Take care of yourself, and I will see you at Tiger Fest. Okay, let's head back to YouTube and see if we got any good comments there. All right, we're back in YouTube looking at the comments. Let me roll it back to last week. Desm 101. Good to hear from you, brother. He writes 8 minutes and 32 seconds in. I'm so bad at cable management, but I have 12 systems hooked up to my HD TV at once through a multitude of upscalers, switches, converters. Lol. I've been trying to make a video about how I hook up and capture my games, but the cable management has stopped me until I fix it up, because I know people will have a fit trying to watch a video with my messy cables everywhere. Yeah, it is what it is. Cable management is a weird thing. It's like everybody gives each other a hard time about cable management, but there's very few people who are actually doing it well. And I know this, having worked in IT. I see the way real people handle cable management. It's not good. There are a couple of workstations that are like high and tight, and the cables are hidden. And I one guy in particular who's not there anymore did it really well, but it's rare. It's rare. So your place probably looks like the TV that belongs to a human being. So what are you gonna do? The only plausible solution I've come up with is less systems. So I had to take a couple of my systems off for now. We've got TVs set up in a few different locations in the house, which makes it easier. So like here in my office, which you would consider, the game room, I guess, I have the systems I'm most likely to play, like right now. But then in the basement, I got a little tube TV. I could take the master system and put it down there in case I wanted to play a couple rounds of Great Baseball or something. And then I can kind of spread it out that way, which is nice. The multiple, like every system on one TV, it's doable, man, but it's too much. It's too much. You're gonna be spending a couple of days getting that straight. In order to get in, quote unquote, get the cable management right. First of all, you're talking about buying a thing of zip ties and a good razor, and really putting a long time into tearing that whole setup apart and then putting it back in one console at a time, one junction box at a time, slowly using Velcro to make sure the junction boxes stay in place. It can be done, but it takes more than I have patience for, and it takes a lot of planning as well. Yeah, that's that. I'd rather just play video games. I don't got time for that anymore. Even my desk now, not even with video games, but just with my music gear. I mean, you were a DJ. You know all about this stuff. Music gear can be 10 times as bad, when you're trying to hook up MIDI's cables and you got all guitar, you throw in guitar pedals and all that stuff. Yeah, it can be a lot of cables. What are you going to do? Good to hear from you, man. Play one of them for me. You got 12 hooked up. Find one of them that's good and play it. Mecha Menace writes, the second song sounds like it takes a bunch of riffs from Sonic and throws them off kilter. I can't remember what songs we played last week. I think they were... Did we do archive chiptunes last week? I can't remember. I know we didn't do a mystery game, but yeah, I don't know. Mecha Menace, good to hear from you, brother. We got one from Balzac. Leaves an audio comment. Awesome. Before that, we got one from Hemrock, who says, nice beard. Thanks, brah. That's my COVID beard. All right, let's do Balzac's audio comment. Hang tight.
So here I am recording another audio comment for Tiger Claw Radio. So first order of business is, I'm really surprised that your kid's not into Fortnite, actually. That really threw me for a loop because I thought all these Gen Zers would be into that game. But I guess your kid is the one exception, right? Which makes me curious, what kind of games is your kid into? Since I know he's in the Terraria, but I'm wondering if you're grooming him into becoming a retro gamer in the future. Hopefully. But he doesn't like Quake, though. I mean, what's up with that? Just curious. Getting your kid into any new retro games lately? Since now he's on and off again co-host to the podcast now. Oh yeah, I wanted to get your take on, ever get into the Phantasy Star games by any chance? Especially since I think I remember one time you said you were into Phantasy Star too, but I was curious if you ever got into anything after the original Genesis games, like Phantasy Star Online or Phantasy Star. I think there was one for the DS, and I know there's a couple for the PSP, and there's actually Phantasy Star Online 2 that you could actually get now through the Windows Store in English. But I'm just curious if you got into any of those Phantasy Star games. I think, and which one is your favorite? Personally, my favorite is Phantasy Star Online, but I like playing it on the original Xbox because the original Xbox doesn't really have that many RPGs, so it's nice to have something like that on that system. If you're curious, I think Phantasy Star Online on the Dreamcast, since that's where it's originally developed on, is dirt cheap. Like, I remember getting it back in 2009 for, I think, $5 to $6 shipped from Amazon, so I'm sure you could get a copy of it if you really want to on the Dreamcast for still pretty dirt cheap. Episode 1, that is, which that's still a pretty decent chunk of the game, and from what I heard, the Dreamcast version still has a dedicated following with a bunch of people still playing it online through a private server. Actually, I think I heard a story once where people are taking Raspberry Pis and connecting it to their Dreamcasts so they could connect their Dreamcast to the private servers through the Raspberry Pi as a passway device. So if you're curious about that, about getting another Raspberry Pi and using it for your Dreamcast, there's one way you can look at it. So I'm just curious, ever get into the Phantasy Star games after the Genesis ones? And, oh yeah, all this PS Vita talk. Personally, in all honesty, I think $200 isn't too bad for a bundle, but if you're just going to use this thing as an emulation device to play PS1 games you already have on your PSN account, I would recommend just getting a PSP, since I think a PSP 1000 you could easily get for maybe like $40 to $60. And if you want to get a PSP Go, I think those run you about maybe $70 to $90. If I was in your shoes, I would just get a PSP Go and then hack it so then I could just play whatever I wanted on it instead of just linking it to a PSN account. But if you want to go the legit way, then the PSP would obviously be the way to go. Since the PS Vita, I heard it could play PSP games, but the PSP games are emulated, so it's not as good as playing on an actual PSP, and I think the size of it's a little bit bigger, so if you want portability, the PSP is the way to go. Just throwing that out there if you ever wanted to get into one of those things. And speaking of handhelds, I'm kind of curious, did you ever get into the Game Boy Color? Because I know you got into the original Game Boy back when it was new, and I think I remember one story you were talking about where you said you found a Game Boy Advance SP on the street once. So I was curious if you ever got into the in-between of the Game Boy Color, which was the in-between the Game Boy Advance and the original Game Boy, and if you had any favorite games that you had for it. I think mostly my fondest memories of playing the Game Boy Color was playing Pokemon Yellow and Gold on it back in the day when those first came out, because I think the Game Boy Color was my actual first handheld, because I never had an original Game Boy because that was kind of before my time. And I remember having a lot of fond memories of playing Pokemon on it, and I think I played that Zelda game on the Game Boy Color, but I don't remember beating it because I kind of got stuck on it pretty early on, or maybe in the middle. I don't really remember, but just curious. Thoughts on the Game Boy Color? Oh yeah, shout out to Hemrock. It was nice to hear how you replied about the Final Fantasy VII remake on my last audio comment, so I want to throw this question out there for you. Did you ever get into handheld gaming, since we're talking about PSPs and Game Boys all of a sudden? I'm just curious, since I know you're a big RPG guy, and I was curious if you got into the handheld library, since there's a lot of RPGs on handheld. Specifically, I think some of my favorite ones on the Game Boy, not counting Pokemon, but there's also Mother 3, aka Earthbound 2, which you could only play through fan translations, and Golden Sun. That's another one that I got into, but I didn't get into enough to actually finish the games, but that was one. And there's also a couple other good ones. I think there's actually some good RPGs on the PSP, like Persona 1 and 2, and a couple more. I just can't remember. Oh yeah, and Lunar. How can I forget Lunar? Silver Star remake, I think, is on the PSP. That's another good one also. So, Hemrock, give me some answers to the handheld question. You ever get into them? How you holding up with COVID, CF, and I guess CF Jr., you're on this podcast episode. You guys holding up okay since it's already month 4 of COVID? It's in the movies? Because when I was a kid, I always used to love going to the movies, and I used to go all the time with my dad and my brother and sister. So I'm curious, CF, are your kids holding up okay with staying indoors and not being able to go outside to the movies at all? Are you renting a lot of movies from Amazon Video? I think has a lot of movies that were originally supposed to come out in theaters. Like I'm hearing that new SpongeBob movie is actually going to be coming out, I think, Nickelodeon's digital service in 2021 since they canceled the theatrical release of it because of what's going on. And that new Scooby-Doo movie also came out on digital instead of actually going to a theater. So I'm curious, how you holding up your kids, CF? You able to keep their attention occupied with some movies that you rent or Netflix being run at full speed? Oh yeah, shout out to G&DB since you mentioned how the Mystery Tune segment of your podcast is actually an inspiration of the Jukebox Break. I was happy to hear G&DB again since I haven't heard their name in a while, and I'm wondering how those guys are doing since I think Gooch, he worked in I don't really know the full details, but I think he was working for some medical company, so I'm sure he was able to work from home, and I think DB was actually a teacher, so I'm really curious to know how he feels about all this online schooling stuff and if he's actually used to now teaching, his students through the internet. I'm really curious about that. I wonder how they're holding up okay. G&DB, almost completely forgot about them. And last but not least, I want to give a shout out to Sendu since he's also been commenting on this podcast for a while. I'm curious, Sendu, what happened to the Fastcast? The last episode was almost a year ago, maybe. Or maybe a little bit less than that, but I'm curious, are you going to reboot that by any chance? And I remember sending you an audio comment when Shenmue 3 was released back in November, and I still haven't heard an episode back, and I'm curious also how you're liking Shenmue 3, since I know both me and you are excited about this game. So, write your reply in the comments section, Sendu, or maybe make another episode. I'll really be curious to hear what you have to say about Shenmue 3. So, I guess that should be it. I'll keep trucking along with Tiger Cloud Radio, even if this whole COVID thing is stopping a lot of people from doing things, but I'm just glad you're keeping it up. So, just want to tell you, I'm just still going to keep listening and hope, try to keep sending in audio comments or when I get the urge to. So keep on trucking along, okay? Remember to, just like you always say, let's all try to stay healthy and positive so we get through this whole COVID disaster together, all right? So see you on the next audio comment.
Heck yeah, man. Thanks so much. Glad you're hanging in there and doing well. It's good to hear from you, brother. So let's talk about a couple of the points you raised. First and foremost, Hemrock is like the original Game Boy guy. So I know that he, at least recently, not in the last couple weeks, but I think maybe a month or two ago, he was talking about getting back into the original Game Boy again. Now, modern handhelds, I don't know, Hemrock, what do you think? Was that ever your thing? Don't know. Let's see. CF Jr. not being into Fortnite. Yeah, a lot of his friends are. Just him. And in terms of what games he likes, he usually likes anything he can be creative in. Like he's playing ZZT, which is an old, I mean, that's a retro game. That's 91, 92, something like that. But it has a game builder in it. And he likes Trackmania because it has a track builder in it. And he likes Terraria because the whole game is creative. He likes, stuff you can be creative in. You talk about Phantasy Star. The most time I ever spent with a Phantasy Star game was Phantasy Star 1, which I bought at the very end of the Virtual Console lifespan on the Wii. Just before they shut down the Virtual Console store, or the WiiWare Point Shop, I bought Phantasy Star, and I almost played it all the way through there. I really enjoyed it. It's a good game. But I don't know, I got sidetracked. I liked it though, man. It was good. Yeah, I kind of want to get back and try that again. That'd be fun. Phantasy Star is a good game. I talked a little bit about Phantasy Star Online early in the show. But yeah, you're right. There is, I think that you might even have heard that here, because I remember reading all about that there was a forum of people who were playing their Dreamcasts online, and they were doing it by getting a Raspberry Pi, and then you'd get a Raspberry Pi, you'd get a dial-up modem for the Dreamcast, which is like $15, and then you'd have to build some sort of resistor device for the phone. Build yourself with Vero board and soldering in a couple of resistors. Now that I've done a little bit of that sort of thing, a very simple build, but seeing somebody say, okay, now you get the little thing, you solder on the resistors, I was like, nope, that's where I check out. Now that it's been a couple years, if they're still doing that, I might revisit it and actually, try and do that. That'd be fun. I looked up the original Phantasy Star to see how much it's going for. It's gone up a little bit in price since you got yours. It also could be the COVID thing driving some of the prices of these games up. We're looking at it like around about $20, a little bit less in some cases. It looks like the cheapest I could get the game for right now is a disc-only copy for $10.50 shipped. So yeah, okay, that's not too bad. Yeah, I would try that Dreamcast game again. Or rather try it for the first time. I think it'd be a more accurate statement. Yeah, never got into any of the modern Phantasy Star games. Would love to though. Would absolutely love to. So you play it on the Xbox though, right? But you don't need to play that online. Xbox has been shut off online forever. Give me a second here. Let me consult my notes again so I can see what else you talked about. Yeah, PS Vita versus PSP. PSPs are easy to hack. Yeah, that sounds good. I don't know. I don't know. That still doesn't answer my question about. You mentioned a few games that on the PSP that are worth getting. I'd want to get one that's not just an emulation device. There would have to be like native games on it that I wanted to play. Now the PSP had some super cheap games like on eBay, like import games. When I was getting my import PS1 games, PSP would come up on occasion, and I even ordered a couple of PSP games that just never showed up, like the Japanese version of Peace Walker or something. One of the Metal Gear Solid games. I picked that up at auction for like $1, and it just never showed up at my house. So who knows? It might still one day. But what are you gonna do? Did I ever get into the Game Boy Color? Yes, I actually have. I got lucky, and at one point, Angie and I, this is probably like 6 or 7 years ago, were buying Game Boy stuff in big lots. The way we would do it is we'd pool our money together and buy a big lot off of eBay, like a good medium-sized lot with like 10 games or something like that, and then a unit. And then we'd pool our money, we'd buy the lot, and we'd split it up because everything in a lot was cheaper. So he did a couple of lots that had units, and we reached a point where he was just giving them to me. So I've got 2 Game Boy Colors just from buying those games, where he was like, yeah, I've got these 2, and I don't need them anymore, so you can have them. And when I sit down to play the original gray Game Boy games, I typically use my Atomic Purple Game Boy Color. So yeah, I got into the Game Boy Color in that sense. Back in the day, I didn't. And it wasn't anything against it. It's just it didn't cross my lexicon at the time. I was more infatuated with the Game Boy Pocket. I thought it was I wouldn't say I thought the Game Boy Pocket was better for any reason. It's just what I was more interested in. I don't know. I still love the Game Boy Pocket. It's an amazing console. Looks great. Feels great. Refresh rate is better than the original Game Boy, but it still has the charm of having the monochrome. Lovely, lovely console. It doesn't have the same issue of the original Game Boy running on a lot of batteries. 4 AA batteries seemed like an awful lot of batteries back in those days. That thing ran on 2 AAAs. Love it. It's great. Wish I still had one. Yeah, the most I ever played on a Game Boy Color was when I got into the Pokemon trading card game on Game Boy Color. That, to this day, is an amazing game that was never duplicated, ever. And I've played a lot of trading card game video games, because, the Yu-Gi-Oh! Had a lot of good games on the Game Boy Advance. I went through a phase where I collected a bunch of those. Hemrock and I were playing Duel Masters. Pokemon trading card game, Game Boy Color, never duplicated. That's still a game worth going back to pick up. Okay. I also got a nice pachinko game for the Game Boy Color, but that's neither here nor there. How are you and the kids holding up with no movie theaters from COVID? Are kids still watching movies? We weren't big movie goers, to be honest. I was when I was a kid, just like you, but that has changed a little bit. I think that now that we have instant video, everything's on demand. It's like, why go? It's 4 times as expensive to go to the movies now than it used to be. There's no reason to go anymore. So like I remember going a couple of times with my wife, like on dates. But whatever. That of all the problems that we're facing with this whole COVID nonsense, missing out on the movie theaters has not been one of them. Kids are holding up okay. They miss their friends. That's really what it boils down to. And shouts out to G&DB. Yeah, man. They were really on the forefront. In terms of how their lives are going, they were both super busy with their careers, even back when I knew them. But when I split with Classic Elite back in those days, I lost touch with Gooch. I had Gooch friended on Steam for a long time, and then we unfriended each other at some point. Yeah, I haven't talked to either of those guys in forever. As far as I know, they just don't do the internet anymore. Not in the public sense. I know Gooch is never giving up his Steam account. I bet I could still look him up. But yeah, that's cool. As far as what they did, like their careers and stuff, I always kind of kept that under wraps because I'm not sure how much of that they felt comfortable with me talking about on the air. And even though I don't know them anymore, and I'm sure they don't listen to this, I kind of gave them my word I would protect their identities. So that stuff kind of goes down in the books. If you and I ever talk in like Discord or something, I'll lay it all out. But yeah, I don't know. As far as I know, they've retired from the online scene. God bless them. I hope they're doing well. I really do. Yeah. And I still think of those two every time Mass Effect comes up, particularly Mass Effect 2. But I got to go back to their website and get a few of their old episodes while they're still available. Because you know how websites, especially small ones, they have a habit of just going away after so many years. Some of the early G&DB episodes that I did is some of my favorite podcasting that I was ever a part of. So, yeah. Especially the earliest ones with me and Jerry Terrifying are my favorite. That'd be fun to get a hold of some of those and listen to them again. And then lastly, we got some from Light Studios. Our good buddy Sendu writes, if Swingle wants us to record more Let's Plays, then it's time for us to release our collaboration, Tuesday's Terraria. I'm in. And he says, hit me up when you want to plan. Yeah, man, we got to figure this out and make it happen. If for no other reason than just because I want to spend an evening playing Terraria again. The last time we tried it, was Hemrock there that day? I seem to remember us playing one night and building a house with a big staircase and not really getting any further than that. But yeah, that would be a lot of fun. And that's the bell. That's what I call the sound of doom. So I think that's going to be it for me.
Well, you know what that sound means? You know what that sound means, buckaroo. Whoa, that means another week in the bag. And so, as all good things do, this week's TCR comes to a close. Thank you for spending some time hanging out. I hope you're staying safe. I hope you're staying safe and eating good food and not getting sick. Playing video games. Hey kiddo, you playing any? Hold on a second. Let's stop this crazy. There we go. I just had to cut that so I could hear. You playing any retro games lately? That was the question that came up on the podcast earlier. So have you been in any retro games lately? Because the best I could come up with was ZZT, because that's pretty retro.
Well, then the answer is yes. ZZT.
ZZT. Yeah, but you don't play really like any of the. We had some interest in the Dreamcast.
ZZT's the only one.
The only one? You don't really have any interest in my PlayStation games or my Nintendo games or my Atari games or any of that stuff? You can have that, yeah.
No, but I am interested in this comic.
Yeah, he likes Archie comic books. Is that the one you want?
Yeah.
Okay, cool, man. All yours. All right, that's it for the week. I'll see you guys next time.